and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made this autumn fairy costume. Since Monday is the first day of autumn, I decided to make a fairy costume to represent the new season, and this image is actually the inspiration for this costume. The first thing I did is I covered my dress form in saran wrap and then duct tape and drew my pattern on it. The way I make patterns could be easily transformed into an adult size as well. Here I'm drawing out the pattern. I put R for right, of course, and L for left. With this dress, I did not want it to be symmetrical at all, since leaves are not, and in my mind this fairy made all her clothes from the autumn leaves. And it will have shoulder straps, and I will attach fake fall leaves to those. When I first made this pattern out, I decided it was going to have a front closure. However, you'll see later on that I actually changed that and made it a side closure. Now, since I have the bodice all drawn out, it's time to cut it off the mannequin. I know this dress form is a lot bigger than my daughter by several inches, so I know I'm going to have to cut the pattern down. Also, when creating your own patterns, make sure you make mock-ups and not use the actual fabric you're going to use for the costume. Here, I just used the original pattern pieces I created and cut them out on black fabric and made a mock-up with them, and then I tried them on my model and then cut them down accordingly. Here, I'm just cutting out the bodice pattern. I did add 3 inches to each pattern because when I tried it on my daughter, it was not long enough. I got this orange broadcloth for the base of the dress. For the straps, I was going to use clear elastic, but I decided not to since I needed to have strength so I could sew maple leaves on top of it. So here I'm just cutting out 12 inches by 1 inch thick pieces of fabric. I did cut out 4 of these pieces, and I sewed 2 together to make it actually 2 inches wide by 12 inches long, and then I ironed them down into 4s. Here I'm sewing the bodices together. Since the bodice is lined, I'm basically making 2 of the same thing. Here I'm just ironing the straps down so I can sew them together. They will eventually be about a ½ inch wide after I'm done. Now it's time to attach the straps. I did cut these down eventually since they were 2 inches way too long. The bodice got thoroughly pressed. For part of the side closure, I added a piece of ribbon to each side so it could be closed shut. And then I sewed on hooks and eyes for the main closure. For the skirt, I used the same orange broadcloth and just cut it in a rectangle. I did make this a mini skirt since I will be overlaying it with the red fabric. I ironed down the top and the bottom of this rectangle to hide the raw edges. And then I eventually sewed those edges down. I then attached the skirt to the bottom of the bodice. At this point, it's time to sew on the hooks and eyes for the closures. For the overlay fabric, I chose this really pretty burgundy-ish red Georgette fabric, and I wanted the skirt really flowy as the reference image. And I got the orange broadcloth fabric and this red Georgette fabric from the Fabric Experts on Etsy. I will leave a link below in the description box if you want to check out their shop. They have some really nice fabric for really decent prices. For the skirt, I started pleating the red fabric on my mannequin. I only went a little above 21 inches. My daughter's waist is that small. Once I got the skirt pleated, I just went ahead and cut it all the way up. I did use a bit of masking tape to keep the pleats intact while I unpinned it from the mannequin. Once it was free, I just went ahead and did a stay stitching on the top of the skirt. Now here's the skirt that is all stitched up on the top. Pleats are intact, and since I did not want this skirt to be a uniform or symmetrical piece of fabric, I went ahead and started chopping it up into more of a point at the bottom. As far as the points, I wanted them uneven as possible. After I sliced all the fabric up, I went ahead and used fray check on the edges. So on the front of the bodice, I wanted it to look like maple leaves. This was a bit tricky because I couldn't figure out how to make the maple leaves that were structured enough where they would keep their shape. So finally I came up with an idea of printing off a maple leaf pattern, taking some lightweight interfacing and the orange fabric and ironing those two pieces together, and then overlaying the red fabric with some fabric tack glue. Since I'm still a novice at sewing, my hand stitching is not the greatest. And as you can see from the maple leaf pattern, it has way too many points that I felt I would not be able to accomplish neatly. So here I'm cutting the maple leaf out of the orange and the interfacing. I eventually cut out 10 of these, but realized I did not need all 10, I only needed 8. And then I eventually took fabric tack glue on the front of the orange maple leaf and stuck it down to the red fabric. And then once that was dried, I folded it over and made basically a sandwich out of it. And once the glue is dry on both sides, I just use my little sharp scissors and I cut the maple leaf out. When I had all 10 of the leaves cut out, I tried the dress on my daughter and pinned the leaves where they fit. They were going all different directions, and then I hand tacked them all to the bodice of the dress. For some reason, I'm missing the footage of when I attached the skirt to the orange fabric, but all I did was just attach it to the waistband of the orange fabric. Now, to give the maple leaves some definition, I went ahead and mixed up some brown, red, yellow, orange, and a tiny bit of black with my textile medium to paint some shadows. And I did this to all the maple leaves and the edges of the skirt. What's a fairy who lives in the autumn climate without some shoes? With this shoe pattern, I just wrapped some fabric around my daughter's foot and drew it out with my fabric marker and then cut it out. I did have to make some darts where the heel is just to kind of like get that bend in the fabric. And I made the orange fabric for the lining and the red fabric for the outer layer. Once the darts were all sewn up, I just connected the orange fabric to the red fabric. I did sandwich some ribbon loops in between that, so that way I had basically a corset lacing going up the shoe to close it. Here I'm just marking out where I want the ribbons to go. I did do 6 ribbons on each side of the shoe, so each shoe had 12. Now the part I actually loved. I think this added so much more to the dress. I found these packages of 50-piece autumn leaves from the Dollar Tree, and I just started tacking them down here and there, groups of 2, groups of 1, groups of 3, all over the dress and the shoes. I also used these maple leaves to cover the orange straps at the top of the dress. The shoes also got the paint job as well, just to add a little bit of definition to them, and then I attached the leaves to them. Because the red fabric is slippery, I did buy these stick-on sole ruffy thingies, I don't even know what they're called, and I did attach those to the shoes. There was also something I attached to the dress that I lost the footage of. I had these autumn color ribbons that I attached to the front and the back of the dress just to give it a little bit more of a flowy fantasy look. And now it's time for the wings. I did have to research this, and I found a video on YouTube from Audrey Bowick, I'm probably saying her name wrong, how she made fairy wings. If you want to check that video out, I will have the link to her video down below. The first thing is I drew out the design on a poster board. I made sure that the sizing was correct for my daughter. And then I took 16 gauge wire and I followed along the veins of the fairy wings. I did have to use masking tape to keep the wire down because it was not straight at all. This wire is easily cut with wire cutters. It does take a little rotating, twisting to get it to cut off. However, I have these heavy-duty shears, and they just cut the wire like butter. I'm just making sure all the wires for the veins start at the base where they're going to be next to my daughter. Now I'm releasing the wires from the masking tape. I did buy some bronze colored duct tape that I will be using to connect all these wires together. My personal preference is I don't like fairy wings with straps on them. So in the back of the dress, I made a cushion pocket to hold the, I would say, handles of the fairy wings. And I'm just bulking up the handle of the fairy wing to fit in that pocket. I did purchase orange cellophane from a website. I will leave the link below. However, I don't think it was the right cellophane because it did not melt like the video I linked down how to make them. But in the end, it worked out fine. To make the fairy wings, I rolled out my cellophane and then I used spray glue and attached the wires or the veins of the wings. Then I glued it again and then I rolled the cellophane over the top of it. I made a sandwich with the wires in between the cellophane. I then melted the cellophane with a heat gun, making sure that I was not right on top of it because it will melt and bubble the plastic. And I did this for both sides. I then trimmed it the way I wanted the wings to look, making sure that I was about a half an inch to an inch away from each wire. As you see, this is actually the second wing I made. The first one I made and just to see how to actually do it. Then once trimmed, I went over the edges again with my hot gun just to make sure everything was melted together. And to add a little bit more definition to the wings, I went ahead and shaded everything with watered down acrylics. To make the wings, they didn't really take that long. They only took about a couple of hours. What took the longest was waiting for the paint to dry. I'm sorry I did not record sewing the pockets to the back of the dress, but here's an image of what I did. And here is the final costume. I love how the dress came out, and I think my favorite part is the wings. Everything is just cohesive. The head decoration I actually had my mother make. She actually just made a circle out of wire and then attached autumn leaves and berries and stuff like that, and then added some ribbon to the back. And as you can see here, there is no straps for the wings. The handles for the wings actually just go right into the back of the dress, and the wings don't twist or get all weird. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, and share. And I will see you next week. Bye!